If anybody wants to, isn't quite sure what I'm saying, the Scottish translation is on Channel 2. Thank you very much. I'd just like to start by thanking most sincerely Nuffield Farming Scholarships Trust for this opportunity and my sponsor, the Royal Highland Agricultural Society of Scotland. I guess being after lunch, many of you think that this talk on diversification into tourism and leisure and agri-tourism is a soft filler stuck in between the main hardcore business of agriculture. I would disagree. I don't think that this topic is a soft filler at all. What I'm here to talk to you today about is I think that farm diversification in the whole will take over mainstream agriculture in the next 10 years in terms of the amount of profit that's driven from a farm business. I think the diversification element will overtake the amount that we make as core farming businesses. I think farming tourists will become mainstream. I think the industry will recognise and then begin to use tourism to engage directly with consumers. They will use it to drive food and drink exports from the UK, and they will deliver a demand. The demand that we have just now from consumers to have an experience with a farmer or on a farm is phenomenal, and I don't think we're meeting that demand. I'd just like to point out this gentleman on the right here. He is an Italian farmer. He's been used to promote a foodstuff, but he is an Italian farmer. I just think that maybe if some of our farmers got a fake tan and put an apron on, we would have a great agri-tourism industry. I also think that factors like cap reform, the fact that land is very limited in supply, we've got multiple generations wishing to farm, and it's very expensive to buy more land. So what's the options? We're all living longer. 1 in 5 of us will live over 100 years. That's a long time if you're 2 or 3 generations behind the person that's 110 waiting for the chequebook. I will focus on Scotland, not because I'm parochial, just because that's what I've looked at in terms of my study. Many farmers in Scotland are making a loss before subsidy. Some make a loss after subsidy. 85% of Scottish agriculture is less favoured area. So doing more with the asset that you have and the land that you've got is a necessity. And this can be true throughout the UK. Tourism and farming are intertwined. Farming provides the beautiful countryside that tourism relies on to generate billions of pounds for our economy. Many farmers I met in the UK were anti-diversification. It affects your core business, they said. You take your eye off the ball. I just wanted to sort of not put the poor man on the spot, but Jim Godfrey down there at my first Nuffield interview said, what relevance has farm diversification into tourism and leisure got for me if I'm farming 2,000 acres of prime land in Lincolnshire? So hopefully I can explain through my talk today that it is relevant to all of us. When I went to Italy, I discovered that the scale of agri-tourism in Italy is vast. The on-farm tourism accommodation in Italy alone is worth £1 billion to the economy. And that does not include farm shops. That's only the 20,000 agricultural businesses that have farm accommodation in Italy. You can't operate a tourism business in Italy without a licence, and to operate an agri-tourism business you need a further licence. In order to have the highest quality stars in Italy for grading for an agri-turismo, you must have a degree or training in agriculture, horticulture or food and drink. You must be able to communicate to people, and you must have a high level of customer service. In this country we focus very much on what the facilities are, but in Italy it's very much about the food and drink experience in an agri-turismo. I was blown away by the experience I had there. 3 weeks in Tuscany, which was murder obviously, but that is why they're the leaders in terms of agri-tourism in the world. In Scotland, we have a tourism business or industry which is worth 10% of the gross domestic output. And we have an ambition or a plan to add £1 billion to a £5.5 billion international industry by 2020. But agri-tourism is not included in the National Tourism Strategy. There's a big divergence between tourism and farming, and agri-tourism in the UK, I think, drops down between both. I'd just like to highlight the point with the number 1 point there to do with that's our own farm and our own diversification. For those people that say it's going to affect the output of your farm by adding on a diversification, we're just a small farming business, a small farm diversification, but we've used the same land asset and added on the same turnover from 0.6 acres. We're doing £10,000 of sales through our website, online and direct into the local economy, that people are booking things like food and drink before they stay, and that's not taking into account people going out to restaurants. So it can make a big difference to the rural economy. But tourism is not for everyone, and my message is not that you should all go home and start setting up a tourism business. If you're a grumpy old sod, or your wife's a grumpy old sod, I would stay well clear of it, because you're not going to do well in this market. You need the attributes. It's not just about learning skills. You need the attributes to actually love and welcome people and have a smile on your face 24/7. If you can't have a smile on your face 24/7, this market's not for you. And there's a reason that sheep don't use TripAdvisor, because if some of them did, you wouldn't be in business. I found that one of the great things I found was that some of the businesses I visited in Italy, Australia and New Zealand were using diversification to great effect for succession. With a fixed land asset, they were managing to bring on 2 or 3 people, to either son, daughter, daughter-in-law, cousin, into the farming business, give them a part of the, even if it was an acre of land, and really bringing on a huge difference to the whole farming output by diversifying, having no effect on the input of the business overall. I just want to touch on what Nuffield has done for me so far. Nuffield has opened doors which previously weren't even ajar for me. I have tried to not wait until the end of my Nuffield experience to start engaging with industry leaders, politicians, government, businesses. I've tried to bring everyone along with me as I've gone along. In January I spoke at the Scottish Parliament about agri-tourism, and agri-tourism wasn't a word that a lot of people used or had heard of in Scotland. I've tried to lobby government since I've come back from Italy about having minimum standards for tourism businesses, and to try and get them to introduce quality assurance for agri-tourism businesses. I've undertook a series of business suppers recently, going around Scotland disseminating my Nuffield findings to groups of people that have actually paid £20 each to come along and hear me. So I haven't just pocketed it, it was to cover the meal. And if you think I'm just focusing on Scotland, I'm moving into England soon, so I will be coming south to share my findings too. I'm taking a group out to Tuscany in the spring. I'm taking 12 rural leaders that we've formed into a strategy group on agri-tourism out to Tuscany to meet some of the business owners that I met when I was doing my scholarship, and to engage with some people at the university. And also as a result of my Nuffield, our hideaway business, I met people throughout the world. I met 3 different businesses, one in Tasmania, one in New Zealand, one in Italy, who wish to franchise our hideaway experience business. So if I could get to go business class to Tasmania to see what my Australian enterprise is up to, that would be an absolutely brilliant outcome. I've also set the record for the most Nuffield scholars in a hot tub at one time, but I don't actually have a photograph of that. But I do have a photograph of, if you want to influence people, you get your local MSP and the Minister for Agriculture to laugh, and it does a lot of good. There's two people in particular, two families who have had a huge influence on my scholarship. One's the Parson family from Hamilton in Tasmania. They farm tourists the same way as they farm sheep. What they basically said was, on their accounts they've got wool output, lamb output and tourism output from their sheep. They're rounding up the same 200 sheep twice a day, and one gets sheared, and that is generating twice the profits of the farming business. The people on the left there were photographing poo. There was a forest with 3 acres, and they were doing a tour at $200 a head round the farm. There was no nocturnal, all the animals, they said, were nocturnal, but they could show you the poo of 20 Australian native animals. It was absolutely phenomenal. This guy was turning over $2 million from tours. Absolutely amazing. Another person who really inspired me was a person you might know, a Tasmanian scholar called Jane Bennett. I spoke to her about how do we progress agritourism in the UK? How do we get businesses to collaborate? And she taught me a lot about how you get a move on and get things done. She says, always work with people better than yourself, always be careful of your brand, have an end point in mind, and don't wait for the masses to join in. And I think in the UK, what we do is we form a committee, we're trying to draw down a grant, we wait for a couple of years, and then the opportunities pass us by. So I'm now adopting the Australian method, which is just bloody well go on and get it done. So we'll see how that might happen. The easy bit for me has been doing my travels. I think the hardest bit for being a Nuffield scholar is to come home and try and create change. So I'd just like to say that thank you very much to everyone who supported me. My Nuffield experience has been a bit of a roller coaster. On the day that I was awarded my scholarship, my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer and passed away 6 weeks later. My dad was diagnosed with cancer this year, and I'd just like to say that the 2012 and 2013 scholars, together with Stephen and Mike, have really got me through this year. It's been an absolutely amazing experience meeting all of you. So thanks for listening. Life is very precious, life is short, so just get on with it, and if you haven't made your mark yet as a Nuffield scholar, I suggest you get a move on. Thank you.